Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Recorded.
Thank-
Is it good?
Yep,
Okay, good. Sorry. Sorry.
yep, I got it. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. So we are super excited to have you join us this evening. And as the Vice President of Education for No Bully, and on behalf of No Bully, our sincere appreciation goes out to each one of you for participating, and especially to our amazing speakers for joining us this evening. 160,000 young people stay home from school each day to avoid being bullied. Our mission at No Bully is to eradicate bullying and cyberbullying while building sustainable social and emotional strategies that ignite empathy, compassion, and kindness in our youth. And tonight we will be hearing from Tina Long, the mother of Tyler Long, who took his own life at the very young age of 17 after experiencing continued bullying in school. Their story is told in the documentary Bullied, directed and produced by the award winning filmmaker Lee Hirsch. And after Tyler's tragic death, Tina and Tyler's dad started a nonprofit called Everything Starts with One, with the overarching guide of if we can increase in numbers, then we have an army and we can defeat anything. Bringing his expertise as a prevention specialist and thought leader in the field of failed interventions and preventions is Rick Shaw, the founder of First Preventers. Rick is an author and trusted advisor to organizations and communities and has been researching the profile of failed interventions and preventions for over 20 years. In 2004, Rick founded Awarity, and in 2019, he founded the nonprofit First Preventers. Rick's new book, published just a couple of months ago in August, is titled The First Preventers Playbook: How to Intervene, Disrupt, and Prevent Tragedy Before It Strikes. The book presents leaders in schools, higher education, organizations, and communities proven research-based approaches on how to connect the dots and take actions to intervene and disrupt at-risk individuals. We're brought together tonight with our shared mission of ensuring that every child has the right to feel safe and protected when we entrust them to their teachers and administrators. Our panelists will be sharing their expertise. This will be the first part of the webinar, followed by the last 15 minutes of Q&A. And as mentioned in the waiting room, we have placed Tina, Rick's, and my email in the chat box, and we will do so again at the end of the session. To get a better sense of how you are coming to tonight's session, we're launching a poll with one question. And you may indeed have more than one answer to this poll. So you can easily click on and indicate how you're coming to this evening's session. So I'll give you a moment to please enter your answers in the poll. So I have about 80% of you that have currently voted. Another couple of seconds here. Okay, it looks like we've stopped at about 80% of you that have voted. And 25% of you are parents or guardians. And another 25%, like one of you, is a No Bully team member. And then we have 50% of you are in the category of other. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. So we do understand that our conversation this evening will bring up some sensitive questions and sensitive topics. So we want to make sure that this is a safe place for everyone. So if you prefer to email direct to one of us, we welcome you in doing so. Our emails are in the chat box. And as well, during the session, you can type your chat message to everyone, or you can type that chat message privately as well by sending it only to the panelists. That's up to you. We're going to be moderating the chat box during our conversation and of course at the Q&A portion of our session. So again, we'll repeat this at the end, but in the very end of our time together, we have a quick 2-minute poll question that we would ask you to complete. And you can take that and copy it in your browser. And I believe that it's already in the chat box now. And we'll place it in the chat box at the end of the session. But now let's get started with a 2-minute film clip from the documentary Bully. And Hannah, you want to put that film clip up, please? We can just give it a moment for that to start. Great, thank you.
The last couple of days, we had heard that Tyler had his head shoved into a wall locker. They said he's a geek.
My concern is that you were making someone feel so uncomfortable they didn't want to be in school.
I feel kind of nervous going to school because I like learning, but I have trouble with making friends.
They said he's a geek. Some kids had told him he's worthless to go hang himself. And I think he got to the point where enough was enough.
Tonight, a tragic situation.
A Perkins boy, just 11 years old, believed to have been desperate enough to take his own life.
This is an awfully complicated and difficult issue.
Kids will be kids, boys will be boys. They're just cruel at this age.
Here, what we get is nothing's wrong. We didn't do anything. Everything's fine.
They punch me, strangle me, take things from me, sit on me.
Give it to him hard!
He's not safe on that bus.
I've been on that bus. They are just as good as gold.
My voice is not going to fall silent. I will go to my grave until a difference is made.
We reached out to parents that have lost kids, parents of kids that are being bullied all over the world, and it took off like wildfire.
All it takes is for one person to stand up.
Be the difference. Go out and find that one child, that new kid standing over there by himself. Be willing to stand up for him.
Everything starts with one and builds up. Eventually, we have an army.
If we all do it together, we will change the world.
So we know that unlike many documentaries, Bully does not include an analysis of the portrayed events, specifically to create an open space and dialogue about events from our past that continue to have an impact on our youth's future and their experience in school. We know from Abraham Maslow's work, The Hierarchy of Human Needs, that everyone needs to feel that they belong in order to succeed and reach their full potential, both in schools and as adults. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tina and Rick so that they can discuss not only the experience Tyler had in school, including being bullied and left out, but also what we have learned from the past so that we can inform the future and help prevent kids from ever experiencing the heartbreak and even the loss of life. So let's now discuss, please, why this documentary was so important as an insight to school culture, but also for parents to recognize what happens in the hallways every day with kids at school. So Tina, what do you think the importance of releasing this documentary when they did? What was that importance?
Actually, this was back before even the Phoebe Prince story. When Tyler lost his life, this was not talked about at all. I remember being at work one day and someone said, "Are you really going to go complain to the school again? Is he really not tough enough to take care of himself?" Well, some of these kids have disabilities such Tyler had autism. Some of them cannot, or they're, it's not in them to do this. So after Tyler's passing, his dad and I went to a local news station because we were swarmed with people coming to tell us what had happened that we did not know. We had no idea it was as bad as it was. And so that's one thing. If anybody takes away anything from tonight, I hope that they understand that if your kid comes to tell you, it's probably 10 times usually worse than what it is. They've already tried other things that have not worked. So that's very important to know. And that's the way it was absolutely with Tyler. But when Lee Hirsch came to us wanting to make this film, I thought, what a great way to start a conversation that no one was having. I was considered the crazy mom for doing it. It was a discussion that no one was having, and it was a taboo topic. And now look where we are. So thank goodness this film was made, because I do feel that it saved some lives. And that's, parents just really have to understand that, especially now with the home school that kids are going through. They're starting separate chats, or doing things that kids are still getting it as we come today. So this is a new era that we're going to have to look at. And we have people like Rick, who is a specialist, I feel like, and just a great person that can talk about where we've been and where we're going.
Thank you, Tina. So Rick, I'm going to turn it to you now, because your work around violence prevention and student safety began far earlier than this documentary. So would you please share your thoughts around it and some of the data behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my I guess prevention experience started way back when I was in 6th grade, which was a very, very, very long time ago. See my hair? It's gray. Anyways, but the thing is that when I was in 6th grade, I was in the quote unquote gifted class, and we had classes in the same building with the special needs class or kids. And like Tina mentioned, some of these kids really can't stick up for themselves for many different reasons. But in this case, one of the girls, kids used to just make fun of her, and she'd have seizures, and it was really scary for her and scary for us. I know you guys can't really see me on this. I mean, you can see me, but I'm not a very big guy, and I was definitely a little tiny guy in 6th grade. But it was just one of those things where I decided, somebody had to step in for MJ. That's what I refer to MJ. And so she, when we stepped in, and I got some friends to help me, and I got my teacher to help me and everything else. And then, things were really a lot better for MJ, and, the kids must've went and picked on somebody else or whatever. I don't really remember all the details of that, but I do remember MJ used to chase me around the playground trying to kiss me, which was kind of weird in 6th grade, let me tell you, but it was all good, because that's really what I talk about when we think about some of these things. We talk about the return on prevention. The return on prevention is such a great feeling, because it was immediate, but it was also for the next 6 years. We'd say hi to each other in a hallway, and then 25 years later, I saw MJ at our class reunion and gave her a hug and met her husband, and then she started sending me digital birthday cards on our class reunion site, and it was just, the return on prevention is forever, whereas return on regret is also forever. And I guess that's kind of what that experience got me to, where I knew, and especially with all the things we were seeing in the news, whether it was, the bullying and the suicides, and then even back in 1999 when we had Columbine and things like that, where, the kids, the two shooters said that they were bullied also. I mean, and so sometimes the people who are bullied can react in different ways. And so that really hit me pretty hard too, because by then I had a child also in school. And so I really started getting interested into why it wasn't prevented. And that's really where my research started. And, ever since now, I've been looking at these post-incident reports, because we've all seen the headlines where, and like Tina even alluded to, I mean, as once the tragedy was over, once they'd lost Tyler, they found other people coming forward saying, hey, here's what was going on. But it was going on before, and people observed it before. And that's really the big gap. And we'll talk more about that as I get into this. But that's really the big gap that we kept seeing, is that these kids who are being bullied in the hallway, as we talked about in the video, but like Tina referred to today, it's a virtual hallway, between classes. It's at home, it's on a chat group or whatever. It's still going on. And people are still observing these things. And that's really when it comes down to, or, those indicators are what we really need to look into to figure out who can step forward and help. And that's really what it's all about.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Thank you. So Tina, would you please talk about who you think carries that primary responsibility for the effects of bullying, and what can parents learn from what their child is experiencing?
Oh, I think we all carry that responsibility. As we traveled across the country and went to different areas and different schools, the most successful area we went to, they had a community involvement. It was from the bank to the sports field, to the teachers, to the parents. It was everyone, even the grandparents. And that's where you saw the most success. Getting that community buy-in is a little harder. But that's what people have to understand. It's everyone has to come together. It's not just the school. It's not just the parent. You can give them. And that's why things like being here with No Bully, and you, Kathy, and you, Rick, with First Preventers. I mean, it's what it takes. It takes all of us together, working together to build that army to help our kids. And parents really have to pay a lot more attention, I think, than what we do. Just because our kid appears okay, just because things, it may not be totally obvious. And I know with Tyler, we had no idea. He came home. He had worked that night, put his clothes in the washing machine to go to work the next day. Everything seemed okay. And then I later found out he had a horrible day at school. Horrible, awful day. And I thought we knew. We were in a small town. We raised him there thinking that was best, so we might know what's going on. We knew all the kids. We thought we knew. And we still didn't know all of the details, because I don't think that they know that they can come forward. I don't think that they realize that there are things now, because of all the things that we're doing, that it's a very open field now for us. So yeah, it's a good thing what we're doing, I think.
Yes.
And everyone that's here, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina. So you've talked about community, you've talked about parents, and all of us that are joining in this conversation this evening. What about friends? We mentioned, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that important, need to belong and to have a good friend. What role do friends play in a child's life that is being bullied?
Well, here's the funny thing. Even some of his friends went to the teachers to say he was being bullied, and it was looked the other way. Mm-hmm. So what we as parents need to realize is that what their friends think about them is far more important than what we think about them. So, a kid is very focused on, as you say, friends, whether they're real friends or not real friends, or act like they're the friend. I mean, there's a ton of different scenarios. And then you have the few that will stick up, but we have to give those kids that are willing to stick up a better platform and a better way to report these incidents. If we don't, we're not going to prevent them. And that's where I think Rick has this great program, as you will, for lack of a better word, to where these kids would have had somewhere to go. The first time that I heard about Rick's program after Tyler passed, I literally cried when we were speaking, because if this program had been around for my son, these kids would have had somebody to go to, and maybe went in droves. I mean, as far as when they were coming to us after he passed, They needed somewhere to go and do not feel like they were heard. And I think that is hugely important, because I think we can trace it back to almost every case of these suicides that have happened because of bullying. And like Rick said, even to something like Columbine.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Rick, jump in here if you would, please.
Well, there's so many things that go into this, and like you said, there's friends, there's family, there's old friends. I mean, they have so many cliques, these kids, you know, so they could be friends one week and not the next. But the teachers, the adults, you know, the community, we brought up community. I mean, you know, like everything starts with one, talks about getting an army. And First Preventers is really about that too. And again, it's research based, meaning that what we looked at is we kept seeing over and over again that people did recognize the indicators. People did observe the bullying. People did, you know, they saw these things. You know, they saw the concerning behaviors. They saw the suspicious activities. They saw, and it's even more today than maybe years past, but the social media. When I say leakage, I mean people putting things on social media. And so they saw all that. But, you know, one of the biggest gaps, and again, this is just what we learned, you know, we think that by saying, go tell a trusted adult, that is a good idea. And I'm not here to, and so please hear me out. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. All I'm saying is that what we've seen in the research is that one trusted adult can act totally different than another trusted adult, who can act totally different than another trusted adult. And I combine that with some of the data that we've collected we've been doing student surveys now for many, many years. And kids tell us that they tell an adult, and I think the numbers most recently, and they're almost the same every year. It's kind of scary, but about 20% of the time or less do things get better once they report it. Now, again, there's a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different issues, a lot of different things going on there. But the point is that we can't really expect a teacher, a coach, a counselor, a school bus driver, and everybody to understand how to go fix these problems. And unfortunately, that's you know, we've kind of seen that over and over again, that somebody reported. I mean, if you watch that movie, The Bully, or the documentary, The Bully, I mean, there were several examples in there of, you know, just the adults were just disconnected. They just didn't quite understand what was going on, or they only had one piece of the puzzle, not the other 20 pieces of the puzzle that kids knew about. So those are the things that are, I guess, challenging. And what we've tried to put together with the program is to look at all these gaps and these silos and these disconnects and figure out how do we connect the dots? How do we help kids to have, you know, maybe one place to come forward, online, especially these days, even more so than it was in the past. But then how do we automatically get those indicators, those things that people are seeing? How do we automatically get that to, we call it a team of resources, but safety team, a bully team, whatever the school might call them. But the idea, how do we get that to those team of people so they can actually take action, you know, proactive, preventive action? Because sometimes, and I'm certainly not faulting any of the trusted adults here, everybody's doing the best they can, but sometimes a teacher's busy. Sometimes a coach has to go on to the next thing. Sometimes a bus driver has to keep driving the bus, you know, or today we've got Zoom fatigue. I mean, you know, teachers are just fatigued. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things, and that's why we've got a big gap there that we've got to address. And that's one of the big things, because people do see these things. We just got to make sure that we get those pieces of the puzzle to the right people who can actually see the bigger picture and then take action.
Thank you,
Rick. I'm sorry. I just want, some of Rick's people on this team have been police officers in the community. It doesn't necessarily even have to be school system people. Of course, some of it does need to be, but some of these schools have pulled in different people in the community, even organizations such as No Bully or whomever it might be, to help with this issue. So that's what I'm saying is that the more successful ones, I believe, are using all of the available resources that they might have out there to them.
That's a good point, because the community has a lot of resources, but they're not always connected.
Right.
And so again, we have to connect those dots with law enforcement or social workers or the mental health resources, or even in some cases with adults, it's the employee assistance program people. I mean, the resources are out there. We're just, again, they're just not getting connected. And not to get off on a tangent, but then there's FERPA and HIPAA and all kinds of other barriers that get brought into this. And they're not really barriers. They're misunderstandings for the most part. But again, I won't go down that path right now.
Yeah, thank you both. And so we do know that absolutely it's important to bring in all community members as we can and all stakeholders. And when we think back to my comment earlier about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow posited that there's a human need to reach our full potential, and right in the middle of that triangle that he speaks of, after food and safety and shelter are met, is the sense of belonging. And if we don't feel that we belong to that community, we may not go and report. We may not seek out the person that can help us best, whether it's a friend or an adult, a trusted adult at school or in an after-school program, sports program, a counselor, wherever that adult may be. But we do know that when we leave those connections to chance, there is, lower dropout rates, less connection to school, lower academics, the academics drop. So our work in schools with No Bully is we do work with all stakeholders, and we bring in training for a select group of individuals to run solution teams, is what we call them. And it's restorative work where we bring students together, and the solution coach helps walk students through what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, to understand what that child is going through and help solve the problem. And certainly within that, as you both have said, and Rick, you particularly, there are other individuals that may need to be brought in to connect those dots and to assure that that child does not fall through the system. So our work as evidence-based work, we're leveraging the empathy with students, and we do bring in those other community members as necessary. But our work includes work with staff and work with students and work with administrators and work with parents and guardians, because they're part of the system. They're part of what helps it work well. And they're also, all of those people can also be part of the problem. So, I'd like to move it back to Rick now so that you can speak, Rick, if you would please, about some of the signals through the work that you're doing and the data that you're collecting. What are some of the signals that you're seeing that can lead to a student feeling, insecure and endangered at school and in the broader community?
Well, before the pandemic, when you had all the kids really going to school, you could potentially observe some of those things. So you might see someone who has, their the way they dress has changed, the way they their hygiene has changed. They start maybe getting, even if they're fake, but tattoos, or they start writing things on their book covers, or unfortunately some people cut and they start wearing longer sleeves, all year round and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of different indicators out there. I mean, there's kids that used to be involved in sports that are no longer, they drop out of sports, or they, there's things like where they're joining a gang, or maybe there's some gang symbols on their hands or their book or whatever. I mean, so there's a whole lot of different indicators that we need to be on the lookout for sure. But like I say, the challenge is even worse now, because for some schools there's some schools that are not holding classes at a school, they're holding them online. So it's very hard to see some of those indicators now. And so it's actually gotten even worse. The disconnects that I was talking about, some of the gap, silos, and disconnects, it's even worse now, just because these kids are not coming into where a teacher can maybe see them, maybe see a bruise on their arm or their face or whatever the case may be. So those are, I mean, there's, like I said, there's a whole lot of different indicators, but we've got to be on the lookout for, so that, again, those are all, you know, whether you want to call them dots being connected or pieces of a puzzle to see that bigger picture. That's really one of the things that's missing the most out there, based on the research.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because it certainly is more challenging, as we're experiencing even this evening. You know, we're in a virtual setting and we're seeing some body language, we're seeing some facial expressions, but we're certainly not able to connect the way that you connect in person. So that challenge is absolutely greater for our educators and for our kids, and really being able to tap into what their needs are virtually is very challenging. So that leads me to my next thought around, you know, as we look at our future and currently what's going on in the world today, and we're all in these virtual settings now, through your own lens, you know, what do you see as bullying? You know, what's this new look of bullying, and during COVID-19, the pandemic, as well as the racial unrest that we're experiencing? So I'll open it up to either one of you that want to jump in there.
Rick.
Okay. Well, today, you know, it's so much more difficult, in my opinion, just because, again, you might be able to observe someone getting bullied in a hallway if you're at school, and you know, maybe multiple people would see if it's in a hallway or in a locker room or on a bus, like the bully documentary with Alex. I mean, a whole busload was seeing it. You know, but that's not happening in the virtual world. I mean, people aren't seeing it. Bullying is still happening, unfortunately. It's in chat groups, but again, now you've got a group of people in a chat room that can see it also. Or you've got, you know, the whole TikTok and all these other things where you're trying to keep up with the, you know, look cool or whatever the case may be. And if you don't look cool, you get made fun of. And I mean, so there's so many different ways that now the bullying can take place virtually, and or even just offsite at home. I mean, unfortunately now domestic abuse and child abuse and other things are entering into it, because unfortunately you've got just a lot of stressors going on in a lot of homes if the parents maybe aren't working or something along those lines. So, you know, you've just added in a whole new layer of stressors and challenges for that kid, or multiple children in the home there. So, you know, it's even more challenging, which I want to mention real quick here, is that even before and for sure now, one of the biggest gaps, and this is so important, but one of the biggest gaps we see, or actually I should say one of the biggest reasons there's silos, is that for whatever reason, we've decided as a society that we keep adding more and more incident reporting. Okay. And I'm not saying that's bad. It's just that you got see something, say something, you got safe to say, you got at state level, I mean, at federal level, and then state level, and then you've got local things, and then you've got apps and texts and hotlines, and then go tell a trusted adult, and then go tell your parents. And then, I mean, the problem is all these pieces of the puzzle we keep talking about that we absolutely need, they're scattered. And now they're more scattered with the virtual, because again, those pieces of the puzzle used to before used to be like in a classroom, and now they're out in homes. So it's really, really important that we find you know, going forward, like you mentioned, we find a better way to bring together all these pieces of the puzzle, so that again, back to the team members, whether it's a solution team like you guys do, or whatever the case may be, but so that these people who are trained to actually prevent can actually go in and see the bigger picture, that if you only have one piece of the puzzle, it's pretty hard to take the right actions. And that's what we see mostly right now. Sorry, Tina, go for it.
Well, I guess the thing that I'd like to add, and this is where I think we don't have, say the teacher is watching the kid at home get abused. Say they're at home all day and they have no supervision. And these teachers are observing these things, or we don't have a platform right now for who does this teacher go to? What does she do? Who does she tell? And that's just one example of the new things that we're going to be seeing. And that's where, you know, I know a lot of where Rick's work comes into. We have got to get something for the new situations that we're having, because it's going to get, things are going to pop up that we're not used to. Things are going to pop up that we don't know yet. So we have to keep evolving with what's happening right now in our country. It has to be an ever evolving thing. We can't stop just because, oh, the kids are at home now, or a lot of them, so the bullying's going to stop. Or maybe they're at home and their parents drinking all day, or whatever situations come up. We have to be that support and teach people what to do, because right now I think a lot of them are saying, what do I do? And we don't need, we can do better. All of us together, we can do better.
Yes, thank you both. And I've seen Rick's data and connecting all of those dots, and it's critical that we all do work together so that there's not a gap. You know, as Rick has mentioned, that we don't miss something that we should have been able to see, and we look in retrospectively and we can see it, but we need to be able to see it in the moment so that the right action is taken.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
mindful of, I'm mindful of the time, and I want to make sure that we capture any questions that people may have that they'd like to place in the chat box, or for everyone, or privately. So while you're placing some comments or questions in the chat box, I'm going to turn it over to Tina and Rick to I know we discussed, have covered a lot of subjects tonight, but I'm just going to turn it over to you to go for it.
I guess I'll start by giving a little tidbit about the film Bully. I know a lot of you guys have seen it recently. It's been on Netflix. So one of the funny things, sort of, it started out not the name Bully. It started out called The Bully Project. And Lee Hirsch and Cynthia Lowen, they were dating actually at the time. And Lee had been bullied as a kid, and he was seeing things happen and decided to make a documentary. When it was bought by the Weinstein Company, they changed the name and changed the trailer and changed a lot of things, but nothing for the negative at all. And if it wasn't for the Weinstein Company, I don't know that it would be distributed and be on Netflix for us to see. So I'm appreciative of that. But I got a call from a little guy named Lee Hirsch, and he said, I'm coming to your house tomorrow, and I'm in New York, and we're going to make a film. And I thought, you know, we were still grieving. It was like a week or two after Tyler passed. It was very, very early. And I said, I don't care what you do. I mean, and I don't even know you. I don't even know if you really have an Emmy. I don't care what you do. And that was my thought at that time. But luckily we did get this film out. And like I said, I don't think without the conversation that allowed to get started, that we wouldn't be here today. So, you know, if it helps one person, it's connected me to some wonderful people that I know is out there doing great work. So we're not at home thinking, is anybody going to help us? And I think that's what some kids think, is anybody going to help us? So now we have people that can help. And I'm just thankful, and I'm grateful for every one of us that's out there trying to do something.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tina.
I did just, what I would like to add to that is, I don't have as good of a clarification of the title that Tina had. So this is not necessarily that exciting of a tidbit, but I do want to make sure that something that gets misunderstood sometimes is, what does first preventer really mean? Does that mean vigilante? You know, like, do I have to step in? No, that's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about with first preventers is, it's kind of like a, you know, football team or a hockey team, or, you know, some sort, you know, other teams, a surgical team. everybody's got a role to play. And sometimes all you have to do is report that piece of the puzzle. If maybe that's the job of the first preventer, is because you can't prevent something if you don't know about it. So your job is to help. And so we use like the butterfly effect, because snitching, nobody likes to snitch, right? So snitching is a big problem. So we use the butterfly effect, and you just go click on a butterfly icon and report it. Now you're helping, because one small thing can save a life, save a friend, whatever. So again, we're trying to address these gaps and these silos and these disconnects with better ways for people to come forward. But they don't have to be vigilantes to like step in, because they don't have to. And there's a lot of confusion about bystanders and all kinds of other things. This is all about, you can do so many different things to help, and especially if you're on one of the prevention teams. And I do want, maybe you're going to bring it up, Kathy, I don't know, but I saw something in the chat that I wanted to address, if that's okay.
Yeah, please. So let me read the chat now. Thank you, Rick. So we have a comment from one of our participants that states, my daughter was bullied so bad by a group of girls. I was at the school at least twice a week, sometimes more. Now she has become a bully and told me, well, if I don't do it to other people, those people bully me. Thank you for placing that in the chat.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's unfortunate, because when we look at the data of the surveys I mentioned a little bit earlier, we see, if you're a kid and you've told someone multiple times, I'm being bullied, and it's only going to get better 1 out of 5, 20, less than 20% of the time, what do kids do? They bully back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or they start cutting, they start drinking, they join a gang, they get, sad, they get depressed. We can trace this all back to the fact that if we don't get our teams aware of these things to help these kids out, they will take matters into their own hands. And that's the last thing we want kids to do. And it's not that we don't trust them, it's just that they don't know what options they have. So I appreciate that was placed in the chat there, because it is a huge problem with, or a result or a consequence, if you will, of when schools don't have a way to funnel these things together, get it to a team who can actually take action, so the kids can see action has been taken.
Yes, thank you, Rick. And for the work that we do in schools that partner with No Bully, those teams are called solution teams. And it's true that many kids would rather engage in negative behavior to bring attention, to get help, because no one else is listening, perhaps. And they're also afraid that if they don't do something, as our participant states, that it will happen to them also. So in the process of solution teams, kids get together and hear what it's like for that other child. And by stepping into someone else's shoes and really understanding it, those kids can understand that being mean and being cruel and isolating another child is extremely hurtful, and that they also would not want it to happen to themselves or to their best friends. So they are the ones that come up with solutions, because we as adults get it wrong so often, right? We can tell kids what to do, but so often we don't say the right things, or we get it wrong. And when kids come up with those solutions themselves and take ownership of it, that's when it really works, because they're the ones that have figured out how they're going to fix the problem.
Yeah, just to add on that real quick, you bring up an excellent point, that a lot of times when we think about bullying, and there's certainly other consequences we've already talked about, but the focus should be on the person being bullied, yes, but like you're talking about, it should also be on the people who are bullying. Yeah. Because again, you're right, they don't always understand. They may have grown up in an environment at home where bullying was just an everyday occurrence. We don't know that, and we got to learn that and help them understand that. So yeah, the awareness and the support and everything needs to be with everyone involved, if you will. Not everyone, I don't mean the whole school, but I mean involved in those incidents.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And we used to think that a situation was just the bullying student and the targeted student, but we all know that it goes way beyond just those two kids, right? There's always, that circle that surrounds the situation, whether it's in a chat box virtually or whether it's on a playground or on the hallway. There is a group of kids that are aware of it. And so, you've got that bullying kid, you've got those bully followers, you've got those bystanders. And by creating, and when schools do create a safe environment, then kids can feel safe to step up if they also feel safe to say something and do something. But it's not just, one or two kids, it's a systems issue. It's a systems problem, but it's also the way out too.
Well, and I know Tyler had one kid made a comment, and this was on a public forum. Tyler had over 200 kids in the school that bullied him. He was the target. They knew that they could. But here's the thing, and you kind of touched on this, Kathy. A bully is only a bully with an audience. Without an audience, he is not a bully. So, we once we take that away, once we take that power away, then they stop. And we know this. So, it is we've walked in some schools and just the atmosphere, you knew it wasn't tolerated. And then we'd walk in others and just, it was a total different, place to be. So we had many kids, say that my school doesn't do anything. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to tell. That's why I think it's just so important that we empower these kids, get the power to where it should be, and take it away from the place that it shouldn't.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add to that a little quickly, because you're absolutely right, Tina. I mean, they've got to have a way to, we've talked about give them a voice. We want to make sure that people can be heard. But that too many times we force them to do it in person, these kids, and they don't want to do it in person. I mean, they don't want to be, snitches get stitches. Okay. I mean, they know that. And these bystanders that don't want to get involved. I mean, we as adults see things and we don't want to get involved. Okay. So, I mean, to think it's a kid thing is missing the whole point. But we have to give them, like you said, they don't know where to go to. Well, who's in charge of bullying? Well, who's in charge of XYZ or whatever? We keep forcing people to silos. If we give them a butterfly and they click on the butterfly, and we give them anonymity, true anonymity, there we go. Then, because one of the things that we've seen too is kids are pretty smart about technology. I mean, they're not super experienced, but they're pretty smart. So we've seen schools that said we have anonymous texting. A kid will text in on a Friday night, I'm going to commit suicide. Well, texting is not anonymous. Everybody knows it. Now, it might go to a third party and confidential, but call it confidential, not anonymous, because believe me, if the third party calls up the superintendent and says, you got a kid who's going to commit suicide, the superintendent's going to say, tell me who it is. The third party's going to say who it is. They're going to show up at that kid's house. That kid's going to tell everybody it's not anonymous. And it's done. You've lied, And so we can't mislead these kids or think we're misleading them because we lose trust. Once we lose trust, then you're not going to get those pieces of the puzzle. So it's just this vicious connected circle when you start connecting the dots.
Yes, thank you both. So I'm looking at our time here, and it looks like we're coming up around the close of our session together. So I want to let you know that we are genuinely grateful to each one of our guest speakers and to each of you as participants in our shared conversation this evening. I will be sending a follow-up email with resources to everyone that registered for this session tonight, our conversation. And be on the alert for that if you would, please. And our Hannah has also placed in our chat box a link to our websites and also to Tina and Rick's website, as well as your emails, and as well as mine at No Bully, and the No Bully website as well. So, and of course, if you would like to know more about what we do, be sure to, go to our websites and look at how you can support our work. So thank each one of you, please take a moment, if you would, to tell us what you think about this evening. You know, my ask is that you leave here this evening with one personal next step. You know, what will you do from the time that we've spent together this evening? So, Tina, thank you so much for sharing your story and your bravery for continuing to advocate for all children. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Rick, thank you so much for putting together the Awarity and First Preventers with the data that you've collected and how we can connect these dots so that we don't miss something. Thank you so much. I am just so touched by both of you and by all of you folks that have participated in our conversation this evening. Don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, No Bully.
And
Thank you,
and
Rick.
thanks, everybody. Yeah, please reach out to us.
Thank you.
We're here to help.
Absolutely.